Riot Games has been known previously for its interesting decisions around game balance and its continuous development and production for League of Legends. With over 200 years of collective testing experience and many updates to their design philosophies, they seem to have created something special with the interactions each of the agents in VALORANT have with each other. However, when I stumbled upon Breach, I felt a glimpse of the overbearing, unhealthy gameplay I've always known the boys at Riot Games for. Playing Breach brought me back to the good old memories of playing against the likes of Zoe and Yuumi, but in its 2020 FPS form. If you want an agent whose kit makes you induce true anger into your enemies in the most enjoyable way possible, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Breach. For those who aren't familiar with the format of my character guides, my objective for you by the end of this video is for you to be able to understand the basic ins and outs of the agent while giving you some valuable details and tricks so you can gain a competitive edge on your enemies. This means that I'll be going over each of Breach's abilities, different interactions they can have, and good use case scenarios and situations. So to start off, I want to identify what Breach's identity is within VALORANT. I also want to clarify what I mean exactly when I feel like Breach feels unhealthy. I don't mean to say that Breach is the best agent in the game, but he's definitely up there. I think the big emphasis here is that the agent just feels insanely hard to deal with when played correctly. The biggest offender in the game for this right now is definitely Raze, who is currently all over the place with clips of her one-shotting her enemies with all of her abilities, which feels arguably even worse. But Breach is definitely leaning towards that end. Back to what Breach is supposed to do within the game. Riot has labeled Breach as an Initiator, which essentially means that they are going to be the one engaging and pushing the enemy away in order to force movement. The only other agent in the game who's been labeled as an Initiator is Sova, but he plays completely differently from Breach. Most of Sova's kit has an emphasis on vision control, whereas Breach simply forces his team in without the use of vision. And with the high amount of crowd control that he possesses, I'd have to say that Breach has the best initiation in the game, and brings something to the table that's incredibly useful in any comp, similar to that of Sage. Another big enabler for Breach is that his abilities are supposed to and work best when shot over walls. That's right, all his abilities are essentially wall hacks, and that's when he thrives best. This is the main reason why Breach feels so insane. He can consistently engage from incredibly far distances and can cover entire sites without a problem. If you need to force yourself into an area without having to face check certain areas, Breach will reliably do that for you every time. He can also be an insane disruptor against enemies that want to play for time or are trying to defuse the bomb, as Breach is one of the few agents that can do that without directly making contact with the enemy. When he succeeds, Breach is incredibly fun and satisfying to play and incredibly annoying for enemies. This is actually a bit of a shame because he's not that popular right now compared to other agents, so I hope this guide gives him the bit of credit that he deserves. Remember that I just mentioned that all of Breach's abilities succeed best when shot through walls and such, so that's something to remember throughout the course of the video. Not only does his kit succeed over terrain, but some of his abilities can only be shot through terrain, so he's actually quite reliant on this. All of Breach's abilities can also affect allies as well, so you have to make sure to communicate that before using them, as hitting your teammates with these abilities can also be very devastating to them and can actually get your team killed at times. This also means that having good map knowledge is also quite important for Breach, as this would then allow you to take advantage of the best angles for his engagements. You can still be fairly effective using an intuitive approach and figuring out these angles as you go, but I definitely recommend studying up on each map, as well as having a better game sense than your opponent on Breach can really catch them off guard. Feel free to let me know if you guys want an overview of the maps and specific spots as well in the comments. I'll be going over some cool areas as well, so you have some memorized for when you take Breach into matches. Another good thing is that the game will not let you shoot your abilities into walls that have no other side, such as the edge of the map. This is in place so that it is harder for Breach to accidentally waste his abilities on places where it will have no effect, so good on Riot for putting that in. Now, moving on to his kit. Breach's first ability is Aftershock, which gives him the charge that when fired will shoot a delayed explosion through whatever wall he targets. Enemies hit by the ability will take more damage the closer they are to the origin of the explosion. Initially casting the ability brings up an indicator that will be yellow when pointing at areas where Breach can fire Aftershock, and red at places where he can't. Aftershock costs 100 credits in the shop, and Breach can carry 1 charge of Aftershock each round. This ability has the potential to deal a lot of damage, but does have around a 2-second delay before the explosion actually happens. This means that enemies will have a decent window to escape before the explosion actually hits them. However, this also means that Aftershock can be used as an excellent zoning tool for the same reason. You can also pair Aftershock with crowd control either from Breach himself or from another agent for a potentially insane damage combo. You can also pair Breach's abilities together so that enemies are forced to choose which one they get hit by, and the rest of his kit is pretty devastating as well. For example, if you zone out one area of a site with Aftershock, but then cut off their escape with Fault Line or Rolling Thunder, which are both large AoE stuns, the enemy will then have to choose from either taking a large amount of damage or getting stunned, which is beneficial for you either way. However, most of the time in normal matchmaking, your team won't be that coordinated, so you'll have to rely on yourself for most of these combos, or to use Aftershock as a zoning tool. Aftershock also counts floors as walls as well. So if you're in a situation where you know you're directly above or below your opponent, you can also fire Aftershock vertically to surprise them. An example of this would be Sniper's Nest under Heaven on A site on Haven. If you're holding sight and knowing that an enemy is watching that angle, you can shoot Aftershock and they might just be taking a lot of damage without even realizing what's going on. If you look at the minimap, Aftershock will also show its hitbox when you have the indicator on. As you can tell, it's not that big of a hitbox, and considering its delayed damage, you'll have to be very mindful of where you shoot. With that also in mind, the range of Aftershock is actually incredible, as it can be shot almost as far as you can see a wall to a limit of maybe 40 to 50 meters away. That's actually insane. Enemies who are within Aftershock's area of effect will have a red indicator showing that they are about to get hit by it, so they will know once they get out of its hitbox. Allies will also receive the same indicator and can also even take damage from this, albeit less than enemies, so you should keep that in mind while using it. All in all, although it may seem great on paper, I find that Aftershock is somewhat outshined by Breach's other abilities, but it's still a great addition to his kit. Flashpoint is the first among Breach's 3 crowd control based abilities in his kit. Casting it allows Breach to essentially shoot a flashbang, except that it also has wall hacks built into it. Flashpoint has very similar characteristics to Aftershock in the way that Breach can manipulate and fire it, so it has a lot of the same features and drawbacks. Quickly going over that again, this means that Flashpoint can only be shot over a wall, has incredible range, can be shot vertically, and can also flash your teammates. So this means although it is incredibly powerful and versatile, you also have to be careful when and where you use it. Unlike Aftershock, however, Flashpoint's delay before activation is much shorter. I'd say it only takes half a second before the blind activates, so it's much easier to land and can be relied on. Flashpoint costs 200 credits to purchase, and Breach can carry 2 charges of it per round. Flashpoint, just like Aftershock, also has a similarly placed minimap indicator over the wall that will be fired, except that this time it will be a yellow circle. The area of its blinding effect is a lot larger than the circle, but the circle is there just for reference. Flashpoint is excellent for attempting to retake sites and trying to peek angles, as it is a reliable and consistent form of utility that forces enemies to get off of their angles. If you're pinched in a certain spot, you can also use Flashpoint to force your enemies to back off and get yourself in a better position. Since this ability activates relatively quickly, you typically want to fire it through walls and angles where the blind will hit your enemies but not you. Any angle with a corner is typically an easy place to do it. Anyone hit by Flashpoint will be blinded for a good 3 to 4 seconds, so you will have ample time to either kill your enemies or force them to back up. Do be careful if they try to shoot you while blinded anyway. Fault Line is Breach's signature ability, and for good reason. Using this ability together with Flashpoint is essentially Breach's bread and butter combo for taking over an area. You use its insane range to threaten heavy CC across an entire site, and then blind everyone as well just for good measure. Breach will also be doing this all from the safety from the other side of a wall. Gotta love balance. Anyways, Fault Line allows Breach to equip a linear blast that shows an indicator to show how far it will hit. You can hold left click to increase the range of Fault Line up to an absolutely ludicrous length. I'm talking like half the map length. Like, this is actually ridiculous. I don't really know why it needs to be this long, actually. Fault Line's range is so incredibly long that you can shoot it from one site and almost reach the center of other sites. Fault Line's length can also be used to cover entire parts of the map. Casting Fault Line at higher ranges will show a similarly long indicator on the minimap, highlighted in blue and showing where it will hit, which helps a ton in aiming it. Letting go of left click from this point will fire the blast, which will daze all enemies in its zone after a delay. I would say this delay is a little bit over a second long. If you want to cancel the ability from this point before casting, you can press the assign button for one of your weapons and you will pull out that weapon instead. Breach gets Fault Line for free every round, and the ability has an internal cooldown of 35 seconds. Fault Line has some counterplay to it, but it definitely does its job of forcing everyone in its path to get out of the way, regardless of whether or not you get hit by its dazing effect. Fault Line also has a component in verticality in that it can be fired at terrain above him, but it will only impact the floor of whatever terrain you aim at. This still means that Breach can make great vertical engages, but you have to keep that in mind in terms of what the ability's hitbox is. Speaking of which, unlike Flashpoint or Aftershock, Breach does not get affected by Fault Line, although all other agents will be. Fault Line, like a lot of Breach's kit, is great for starting engages and will be typically used as the initiating ability for Breach. It's great by itself, and it's also great when paired with other high CC agents like Sage. One component of Fault Line that needs to be covered is dazing, and what that can do to agents who are dazed. Anyone hit by Fault Line is dazed for a few seconds, including all agents other than Breach. Dazed agents will be slowed, have reduced vision, and a gray screen, and will also have greatly reduced rate of fire and accuracy to an extent, which is the big one that I find a lot of people will get thrown off with by now. A lot of people hit by Fault Line will find that they simply can't do anything, as they can't move and they can't fire their guns effectively, which makes them really oppressively when used correctly. Finally, moving on to Breach's ultimate ability, Rolling Thunder. Casting this ability will make Breach equip a really big charge, busting out both hands instead of one. Once casted, Breach essentially fires a wider version of Fault Line that will move through all terrain and will both daze and knock up all enemies caught in it. Unlike Fault Line, Rolling Thunder has a set range, although it is also massive. Rolling Thunder costs 7 ultimate points to use. If you have Breach's ultimate ready, you can make sure that any site is yours for the taking. Using Fault Line and Rolling Thunder together will have enough threat to cover more than any entire site in the game and will force enemies to get hit by something, no matter whether it's a stun, a blind, or simply bullets. Another difference between Fault Line and Rolling Thunder is that Rolling Thunder's stun will move in steps rather than all at once, which means that the farther the enemy is, the more time they will have to run away from it. But this still makes it equally effective at forcing enemy movement and especially good for fights. The big takeaway here is that Breach's kit is incredibly useful for engaging, zoning, and starting fights, which makes it essentially good at every scenario in Valorant. The abilities have decent windup times and give decent time for your enemies to run away, but that's because enemies have to run away. If you're playing against Breach, you don't want to get hit by any of this stuff because you're essentially dead if you do. There have been so many times where I thought that I would love to have a Breach on my team, and he's just great to play too. If you haven't tried him yet, I definitely say you should. He has my full recommendation, and I think that he's extremely underplayed.